It seems like everyone is becoming a teacher. It seems like everyone is going to teach overseas. I never dreamt of becoming a teacher. In fact, when I finished school, I used to say, I'll never. Welcome to my channel. I go by Milano on social media platforms, on Twitter and Instagram. If you go to the old Milano Facebook, you'll realize that it's no longer active. So I've got a new Facebook account, which is called Teachered. It's Teacher D, but together, and with my surname, which is Lamini, the Lamini with an H. Anyway, I'm doing this video to try and highlight my journey and how I became a teacher. I never dreamt of becoming a teacher. In fact, when I finished school, I used to say, I'll never become a teacher. Because why? I was one of those naughty learners. Not naughty to go to the principal's office, but naughty enough to become a celebrity of the noisemakers list. You know? Sometimes the deputy would come in and say, there's no way Mlando's not on the noisemakers list. So I was that kind of naughty. And then I was like, no, teaching is so laborious. You say one and the same thing to different faces, but every year you keep on saying one and the same thing, and you say it right to the end of the year. That was my understanding and interpretation of becoming a teacher. Now, I then dabbed into fashion designing. That's my other passion. I love it, and I actually wanted to go back to it. Just before COVID started, I went back to Eswatini, and I thought I was going to revive that career. And I realized, it's only hitting me now that, you know what, actually teaching is my calling. You know, and it took me to traverse and do other careers and discover other passions, but this one has stuck. Now I live, dream, breathe education. I even dub myself as an education activist, because when I come into the classroom, I already look around and I'm thinking of how we can better it, and I've always got suggestions. I'm always about improving. That's this environment being the base for me to be wild when it comes to being creative. Oh, did I mention that I am my grandparents' wildest dream? 3 of them have passed on. One is still alive, and she's 86, 87 this year. And some even say my ancestors' wildest dream. My paternal grandparents, my grandmother was a teacher. She also worked at the bank. My grandfather was also a teacher at some point, and he even headed ESCOT, which is the Swaziland, or now it's Eswatini College of Technology. He was a principal in a number of schools. Now, my maternal grandparents, my grandfather used to work at the trade fair as the announcer, the main person on the speakers, and he also used to work on the radio, Wakapas. And then my grandmother, who's still alive, she's very good with her hands. She's also a business lady. She used to make these aprons made from a German print. We call it Ditzia in my language. So she's good with the hands. And then it came through to my aunt Lapam. Now, I was a fashion designer. I still consider myself a fashion designer, good with the hands, sewing. I was working on the radio back in South Africa and in Swaziland, and I used to write newspapers. My grandfather, paternal grandfather, used to write columns as well in newspapers. And then I am currently an educator. Both of my paternal grandparents were once educated. Can you imagine? You see what is happening? So that's why I'm saying I am my grandparents' wildest dream. So I'm so grateful. I'm like, wow. So I tapped into all of their careers. I can design, I can write on the newspaper, I can still do radio when I get the chance. So yeah, blessings. Now, how did I become an educator? So this is my journey of studying. When I finished high school, I did fashion designing. After fashion designing, when I hit 21, my dad was like, dude, so you're 21 now, you need to figure out, you need to ensure that what you're doing is going to sustain your living. So basically, if you think fashion designing is it's cool, but think about it, you're hitting 21, so you need to make a change. Unless you decide to go back to school. And then me going back to school, because my school living grades were not good enough when I finished Form 5 back in Eswatini, I then had to go back to grade 11 because I was out of the system for about 5 years. So I'll try and speed up the process. There are so many details which are important, but I'm building up to the reason and how I became an educator. So I went back, and after doing fashion designing, I said I finished high school at 17. So now at the age of 21, I went back to grade 11. So I wrote my matric at 22. And then I started my first degree at the age of 23. How did I get to do my first degree? My dad was like, you're a social person, let's look for a degree which you can qualify for with the grades you've got and so on and so forth. And then we looked for something social, and then we applied for sociology to the Northwest University. When we got to the Northwest University during orientation, I then fell in love with development studies and psychology, as well as politics. And what was the other one? And my majors now were development studies and political science. My minors were international relations, public administration, sociology. What am I forgetting? There were so many minors. Even communication, I think that's where journalism comes in a bit. So there are so many minors. Let me concentrate on the majors. So I do that and I graduate in 2019. Was it 2019? Yeah. And then I furthered my studies. I went for my honors. I applied for an honors at Rhodes University. So I got to Rhodes University. I'm doing my honors in sociology, but with special focus in development studies, because that's what I enjoy. That's what spoke to me. I could relate to it, and I was getting good marks. So when I got to university at Rhodes, it was a culture shock, because now I was used to getting my 80s and 90s. I almost graduated cum laude from the University of Mafikeng if it wasn't for that lecturer who had a bitter qualm and was so offended by the fact that I used to go and inquire, and we were told that you never pass from this lecture. I was older now, so I was like, there's no way I'm going to be told that we never pass. So I want to go and find out, where did I go wrong? But that was him. I think he had his own problems. And fortunately, when it came to exams, the moderators now, I nailed it. I got top marks for an exam. But because of my, course mark, it then brought it down to average. So I didn't get my cum laude. Anyway, we're not there. We're here at Rose now. I'm doing my honors. And then while I'm doing my honors, my dad is like, okay, Sharp, I've pushed you now from my pocket. So you need to figure out what's next. Are you going to look for a job? Or if you're planning on continuing studying, then you need to find a bursar or something like that. So I started searching for what to do next. And then I bumped into BJern and PGCE. Now, these two were both sponsored by the other one was sponsored, I don't know what company, and then this one was sponsored by government. So I was like, okay, PGCE, let me apply and see what I'm going to qualify for. For BJN, I went through the shortlistings, but I didn't make it for that bursary. Was it a scholarship or bursary? But for PGCE, I made it, and I went for foundation phase. Foundation phase, I was thinking, because I'm from the fashion designing, I've got the fashion designing background, and my hand and art crafty things, I'm going to fit in. So that's how I landed in the foundation phase level and PGCE, because now I wanted to take a gap year, but before I do my masters, but I didn't want to go home and I wasn't ready to go and work. Excuse me. So I went to do PGCE. Didn't I fall in love with PGCE when I was doing it? Wasn't I getting good marks? Like, there were challenges in the profession, but for me it was like, wow, why didn't I think of doing this? So that's how I bumped into education. And because I was being paid for by the government, there's an agreement that if the government pays for you for 1 year of studying, then you need to go and work for the government for 1 year. So my contract was that after completing my PGCE, then I need to go and work for a government. They're going to help place me into a school, which means I don't need to apply, thank goodness. And then I'm going to have to work for 1 year in order to repay that bursary, or it was a bursary or scholarship, which they had funded me to do PGCE. So this is how I began falling in love with teaching. During teacher practice, the way the learners were reacting, and also whilst I was researching, I think one of the research topics or fields I wanted to focus on how I can animate myself, to use myself as a tool and animate myself so that I better the understanding of learners. And I never got to really write that, but I was busy acting it out, and the feedback I was getting was so encouraging. So now I'm stuck in education because I've been paid for by the government, so I need to go and give back. But fortunately, I'm enjoying it, strangely enough. And then I went to work. The plan was to go and work for a year or two, and then go back to study for my master's. Way within the first year of my teaching, I went to a meeting, speak and sprat. asking questions. I'm one of those. When now I went to university, I was one of those learners or students who would sit in front, even in a meeting. If I don't understand, let's get it clear now. I'm not shy because I realize that if you're shy, you are going to go home not clear about certain things. So I was one of those. So also in the teacher meeting, I was getting clarity, and then I was identified by one lady from the department. She was like, the fact that I was a male foundation phase educator and I was young, like, there's something about this gentleman. So she invited me to other meetings, and eventually, during my first year of teaching, I became a facilitator, teaching teachers on how to improve their teaching skills. But now it's based on the knowledge fresh from varsity, the passion which I've got. So now I was teaching them how to teach FAL, first additional language, English. Imagine, first year, that opened doors for the rest. Now the rest was, by the time I resigned, I was a facilitator for English FAL from the first year, and then I think on my second year, the HOD left, and then I was nominated by the educators to act as an HOD. Imagine, second year of teaching. And then I acted, and then I think on the third year I was finally appointed. By the way, that was by grace, because I'm not good with interviews. I can't sell myself in an interview setting, but I believe in the craft I do, and I believe it needs to sell itself. Coming from a fashion designing point of perspective, your clothes need to speak for itself. You can't say, me, I can. This is how I... No. The clothes need to speak for themselves. And so I wasn't used to that environment. Even now, I have nerves, but thanks to YouTube, I was able to get tips on how to sell myself when it comes to the teaching profession, interviews, and so on. So yeah, I then became an head of department, young, male, foundation phase, head of department in the district. And then also I became a facilitator for mathematics, which means we used to go for training on Saturday at Saibono, and then I'd come and the district would call teachers to come on a Saturday, and then I'd be teaching teachers on how to improve their teaching skills in mathematics, to help dispel the myths in mathematics, to help move teachers from being learning barriers within the subject, because we come with attitudes, our own personal attitudes and our own experience attitudes towards the subject, and it translates or it reflects on the learners. Whoa, now I'm getting deep. I was still trying to highlight how I became a teacher and why I'm so passionate about it. So yeah, this is it. By the time I resigned, I was a former facilitator for FAL English, lead teacher for what do they call it? PSL, Professional Learning Community, for my district, mathematics facilitator, HOD. And that should basically sum up my passion of what I was doing. No one was pushing me. So about 7 years later, I was still in the profession, and I didn't realize that this is my calling. Also, what was encouraging is when you meet educators coming to ask for advice, and I'm thinking, well, deep down inside, I'm like, me though. And then they come, but you seem to be good in this. I'm thinking, oh, wow, me. And then now I'm beginning to embrace it. It's not getting to my head, but I'm accepting it, and I'm realizing that it helps me grow the more I share. And I acknowledge my mistakes, and when I look back at some of the things, the advices I was given, I was like, yeah, it was in the right direction, but I could have done it this way. It's like when you're teaching in class, after you deliver your lesson, when you look back, sometimes you're like, maybe I should have, So that is how I became a teacher. So ask me now. I'm very passionate about teaching. I love teaching. I love the feeling of seeing a child coming, not being able to hold a pencil by the end of the year, writing me small notes. Teacher D, thank you. You are such a nice... Can you imagine that feeling? So I cannot explain to anyone. This is my vision of the story. So why teachers... Why is everyone becoming a teacher? Why is everyone going overseas? For me, overseas is the ideal platform with the experience I have in teaching. Also emotionally and mentally ready. I think this is the best position. If I came here earlier, I doubt I would have been able to cope. But now is the perfect time. So that being said, I haven't reached my goal. My goal is to eventually get to a level of influencing the policy. I dream of going back to my home country to help improve the system. But there are certain barriers which delay. After eventually getting here around this time, I believe everything in good time. I remember when I finished my honors, I wanted to go and teach in Korea. But then I read and I was like, that'd be too conservative. and I looked at other options. So I wasn't ready. So like I said, if I went there around that time, I doubt I would have enjoyed and coped like I am doing right now. I'm not saying this is at the end. My wish is to continue studying to get my master's, hopefully even get to PhD, but also I wish to get to that level of curriculum designing and influence, hopefully with time. So this is my story. This is how and why I became an educator and why I'm still pushing right now. We don't know what the future holds, but currently as it stands, and currently the energy is all about moving forward and appreciating the space and understanding the purpose, my purpose. Fashion design, I can always do it. That's why I always give sometimes advice, fashion advices also on social media whenever I get a chance, because that's another passion. But currently, education is the one. And others might have other reasons. Maybe they're taking a gap year, maybe they're looking for a career change. But for me, I'm at the right place at the right time. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching my videos. Don't forget to like and share. And I hope it brought clarity and it opens up for others maybe to share their stories which might be inspirational. Siphuma njalo ke squat zamaham ama-apula abo babes bama-vids nginithanda hure.